Hey guys, Ken Smith Fishing. So it is January the 22nd. It is Wednesday before the FLW Tour Event starts tomorrow. So before we talk about that, I got some interesting information for you. Let's look at if you guys don't use this, on the screen behind me, Outlaw Outdoors puts up a Sam Rayburn calendar, and I love it, so you can go and see every tournament that's on Rayburn this weekend. There is a couple of tournaments, you can look that up yourself, but the one I'll point out to you specifically is Sunday, is the Outlaw Outdoors Sweet 16 tournament number 2. I'll be there, can't wait to fish it, going to get my brains beat in, but what the heck, we're down there, so I'm going to fish it. And fishing, I don't think the lake's going to be quite as beat up, oddly as that sounds, compared to what it has been the last few weekends, because there's no other big tournaments coming up. So Outlaw Outdoors Sunday. But what I want to talk about right now is the FLW tournament. So those guys practice Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and I wanted to get a sense of what they're thinking, what they saw, expectations. And so I talked to, in no particular order, Chris McCall, Billy McGaffrey, Matt Reed, Jim Tutt, Nick LeBrun, Dickie Newberry, Clark Green. That's either 7 or 8. I wasn't counting as I was doing that, just to kind of get a sense of what those guys saw in practice. Now, I'm not going to say specifically who said what, because a couple of these guys, I think, are catching them or getting bites in practice. And I don't want to put people, if you will, on them, because they all have sort of, not all, but they have specific things they do, and we'll just let it play out tomorrow. I'm pretty sure there's FLW Live tomorrow morning. I hope there is, because that'll give me a really good excuse not to work and watch fishing on a Thursday morning. But anyway, so just sort of getting a sense of talking to those guys. A couple of them are getting some bites. A couple of them are really struggling. I would say overall they all agree that the lake is fishing much tougher than last year. So there will be a cut to 30 anglers after 2 days. Last year I think it took 31 pounds to make that cut. And pretty much to a man, they thought that number would be 28 pounds. I think the only 2 guys, and I'm going to look at my notes just so I get this right, the only 2 guys who said it might be more was Chris McCall, and Chris said, not based on my bites, but just based on me knowing the history of Rayburn, I think it's going to be 31-ish pounds, kind of like it was last year. And I think Matt Reed said something real similar. Yeah, Matt said basically the same thing, that based upon what he's seeing, but also knowing that there's always guys who figured it out. But they all referenced back to the BFL results the other day when 9 pounds got paid, which is unheard of. And of course I threw a check away, but they said, you know, it's just flat fishing tougher than what it has in years past. And Nick said something to me. So I asked all these guys, do you think Saturday, specifically Saturday, because Saturday there was, my understanding, over 600 boats out in the high school tournament, and then there was an ABA tournament, and then Sunday was the rattle trap tournament. And I asked those guys, I said, do you think, I asked them all, do you think that had a significant impact on the fishing? And to a man, they said absolutely. Interestingly, a couple of them said they felt like maybe the rattle trap tournament had a bigger impact on what they were trying to do than the high school tournament, because as a couple of them mentioned, those fish are aggressive fish, right, if you're trap fishing. And a lot of those fish got caught and moved somewhere else on Sunday. And those fish probably aren't players back in their original home by this week, so 4 or 5 days later. But they also said, Nick put it best, he said, look, last year when we got here, those fish were fresh. We were the first really kind of big tournament to fish for those groups of fish. And he said, but this year, there's been a big Bass Champs tournament. There's been a BFL with 230 boats, so 460 guys fishing for a limit. There's been an ABA, there's been a Sweet 16, there's been a rattle trap tournament. These fish, and I think the words Nick said is the schools are more broken up. He said he thinks there's maybe more schools, but they're smaller schools. So I think overall those guys are anticipating a tough tournament. A couple of guys did have some big bites. One of the guys I talked to sent me a picture, and if he will let me, I don't think he will, but if he'll let me, I'll stick that picture in right here. but it was a fish between 9 and 10 pounds, and he said he had another one in the 7-pound range. And what's interesting from talking to these guys is it sounds like, and I think it's flipped from what I would think, and I've really tried to not ask them stuff that might give away stuff to their competitors, but all of them mentioned, all but one mentioned, they could catch numbers of fish doing certain things, but it was really, really hard to catch quality fish doing things. But there were other ways they could catch quality fish, but it was a big gamble because you can't get many bites doing that. And interestingly, as I think, my sense from those guys is maybe there's a lot of bites available deep, and maybe there are a lot of them are Kentuckies, but that you can catch some quality fish shallow, but there's not a lot of bites shallow, which is exactly opposite of what I thought, and I may have completely misread that, but that was my sense. Only 2 guys out of those 7 or 8 I mentioned, one guy is absolutely staying shallow, and one guy is absolutely staying deep, and if you know those guys, you can figure out who those 2 guys are, and they're just going to fish to their strengths. Matter of fact, the guy who's fishing only deep said, I'm taking everything else out of my boat. I'm going to live or die this way because I don't want to be tempted to go shallow and miss big bite out deep during the day. And that's commitment, and that's how you win one of these things. And that's also sometimes how you struggle in one of these things. But if you're out there trying to win, that's what you got to do. You got to, you got to really just stick to your guns. Everybody. So, and again, if 27, 28, 30 pounds is going to make the cut, and you get those fish either shallow or deep to bite one day, you can catch a big chunk of that weight in a single day. So brave, trying to win, also dangerous. But I mean, this is a sport of gambling. Chris McCall said the guys who make the best decisions this week, and obviously execute, but the guys who make the best decisions this week are going to win this week, and that's absolutely the truth. So I also ask all the guys, oh, so by the way, I had a little bit of footage I haven't shown you. This is footage from actually the week between Christmas and New Year's. So there's absolutely some shallow bites, as I'll show you right here. That fish hit that swim jig and missed it, made a big ball. And by the time I caught up, because I pulled it, by the time I caught up with it again, he got it again. Crazy. But then again, there's absolutely some super deep bites, as I'll show you right here. Banging the bottom with that Cloud 25. Doesn't feel like a very big fish. tell anybody. It's kind of a favorite color. So one of the other things I asked these guys, one of the questions I asked the guys across the board was, what was your best day and what was your worst day? A couple of these guys, most of these guys actually aren't pulling on their fish, so they're not catching their fish. But one of the guys said he felt like maybe his worst day was not catching a limit in practice, and I've heard more of that from non-locals than locals. I do believe this is a tournament where the locals have an advantage. If you didn't come down before practice and you're going to try to fish shallow, you don't know where the grass is and isn't. There's almost no grass above the 147 bridge. You could have spent a day up there looking for grass and not found any. So I think there is a significant advantage to the guys who are locals, or at least spent a significant amount of time down there prior to cutoff. But then on the other side of that coin, so I had a guy say he probably got 30 or 40 bites in a day. He didn't pull on many of them. He said, I suspect most of them are smaller fish. And when he said he didn't pull on them, these guys are cutting their hooks off of rattle traps, cutting their hooks off of crankbaits, throwing Carolina rigs with, you know, a screw lock and no hook, or throwing a football jig with the hook cut off and stuff like that. So most of these guys realize they've got to find a group of fish and they don't want to hurt that group of fish. So they're just trying to get a sense of where to go and look and practice for a group of fish. Dickie talked about this in our conversation. If you haven't seen that, I'll post that right there if you're watching that on YouTube, where he talked about what he learned about how to practice for these tournaments last year. And if you remember what he said, typically when I have practiced for a one-day tournament, I find an area and I get very focused, very minute on trying to find the sweet spot in that area. And he said what he learned in practicing for these tournaments, and several of these guys have told me this, is you just got to get confidence in an area and get multiple areas you have confidence in, because the likelihood with over 100 really good fishermen coming back into that area and there already being somebody sitting on your spot, on your key spot, is really high. So just find areas you have confidence you can catch some fish in, and then dial it in during the actual tournament, so that if you go to spot A, spot B, spot C, and they're all covered up, you got D, E, F, G, and H that you can still go run and have confidence that you can catch some fish in. One of the questions I asked the guys was, when you leave the dock in the morning, how many rods will you have on the deck, and how many of them will be moving bait rods? So the range was, one guy said 4 rods. So and he said 2 of them will be the same thing. So that tells me some guys have some confidence. Most of the guys were 8 to 10 rods. The high, and as I was talking to him, he was sitting in his boat, and he said 13. He said, I'm going to have some back where my co-angler used to put rods. And almost all of them were dead split between moving baits and drag, bottom bumping, whatever you want to call them, worms, jigs, stuff like that. Some of them were deep, some of them were shallow, and again, most of these guys said, I'm going to fish deep and I'm going to fish shallow both some. Nick, who had 90 pounds last year to finish second in this tournament, I asked him his thoughts on the winning weight. He said he really thought it would be 80 pounds. Clark Cream repeated the same thing, and he said actually if anybody beats 80 pounds, he thinks they'll run away with it and win it by 10 or 12 pounds. In other words, somebody might find that mega school of fish, but he doesn't think the general field will do that. And actually, he probably, excuse me for a second. So a couple of guys repeated something along this theme. So again, 28 to 30 pounds to make the 2-day cut, but then 45 to make the 3-day cut. So there's going to be a group of guys who really kind of whack on them. And again, 74 to 80 pounds, way less than the estimate last year to win this tournament. Guys just don't think there are those big, unbroken up schools of giant ones like they found last year. And of course, the lake is so much different. The lake is probably 12 or 13 feet lower than it was a year ago. If you haven't looked, it's back up to right at 163. It was 163.33 this morning, so 1.07 feet below pool. which probably means it's getting a little bit safer to run around on. But I've also heard guys say lots of the creeks have really significantly muddied up. So I thought that was interesting. So that's sort of what I heard from everybody. A couple of guys who really caught them last year are really, really struggling, and those results will bear out. But as I told, I mean, all the guys I talked to are friends, and as I told them, my suspicion is there's a bunch of these guys that are probably already beat. I mean, if you're down there and you don't have the history on the lake and you're not catching them, after 3 days, it gets really tough. And I suspect tomorrow is going to be a tough day because I think all this is going to blow out. They may have a little bit of rain down there in the morning, but once this blows out, it's going to get tough. Now, most of the time on Rayburn, this time of year, you do want the sunshine. You just don't want the first day of sunshine. You want that second and third day, not that post-front bluebird. So, you know, ideally at Rayburn, what you want this time of year is sunshine and a little bit of southwest wind. That puts those fish in places where they can really get caught. We'll see how that plays out, what they get this week. By the way, please don't share. I know he won't watch this. Neither one of these guys will watch this. So please don't share this with them because I don't want to put any pressure on these guys. But of those guys, I ask each of them their pick to win and their sleeper pick. And the two names that got mentioned as their thoughts to win were Nick and Dickie. And both of them because they have the ability to go deep and they have the ability to go shallow, and they'll do both in the same day. That ability to adapt and no fear of adapting is going to be a big deal in this tournament. And of the 8 guys, I think I asked 5 of them their sleeper pick. 3 of them said Dakota Ebear. So I thought that was really interesting. Dakota's sneaky good down there right now, and he's got a couple of deep spots. If those fish get on him, he's going to whack them. And he's one of those young guys who's not trying to get a check. He's trying to win. So those are the guys I would keep an eye on this week. I'm really looking forward to the footage. Thanks for tuning in. My intent right now is to get down there Friday and do some filming. So I hope to have a probably pretty poorly edited video up Friday night of some of the footage off the water with these guys. I'm going to try to find a few guys and follow them around. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have some good footage up Friday and certainly Saturday. And then we'll be at the Sweet 16 tournament fishing it Sunday. So if you get a chance, say hello. I'll be around the weigh-in for sure Sunday afternoon. Hopefully with over 16 pounds. Holy cow, it's been a rough year so far this year. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. Looking forward to a big week down at Rayburn. And I hope you guys stay tuned for more footage from Rayburn.